My daughter called me and said, "We're leaving tomorrow. Your beach house has already been sold. Bye." Her voice was calm, almost cheerful, like she hadn't just erased decades of memories with a single sentence. That was the moment I knew I had to take back control. My name is Emma Smith, and if you're hearing this, I want you to know, betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it wears the face you once kissed goodnight. Before I begin, tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing how far our stories travel. Maybe from a porch like mine, maybe from a city high-rise, or maybe from a small room where you too have felt forgotten. Now, let me take you back to the moment my world cracked open. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the smell of coffee and salt air wrapping around me, that comforting scent that only a seaside morning can bring. The same waves my husband and I used to listen to every sunrise still whispered through the open window. I was half listening to the hum of the refrigerator when my phone buzzed. Emily, my only daughter. My heart beat. I answered with a smile, expecting her usual chatter about the kids or her new business idea. But her tone was different, clipped, transactional. "Mom," she said, "Mark and I are leaving tomorrow." I frowned. "Leaving? Where?" "Out of state," she said. "We sold the beach house. You don't need to worry about anything. We handled it. The money's already transferred." The words didn't register at first. "Sold?" I repeated, my voice small, like it belonged to someone else. "Yes," she said quickly, like ripping off a Band-Aid. "We figured you didn't need the stress of managing it anymore. You're better off without all that upkeep. We'll explain later. Bye, Mom." And before I could even form a sentence, she hung up. Just like that. For a long time, I sat there frozen. The mug in my hand trembled, spilling coffee across the tablecloth Tom and I had bought on our honeymoon in Charleston. Faded now, but still soft with years of memories. I stared out the window at the line of sea and sky, both endless and indifferent, and I thought, how do you sell something that holds your entire life? My husband, Tom, built that house board by board after we retired. He wanted it close enough to the water that we could fall asleep to the sound of waves and laughter from the pier. It wasn't just a house, it was us, and now my daughter. The same girl who learned to walk on that porch, who built sandcastles in that backyard, had sold it behind my back. My throat burned as I whispered to the empty room, "Why, Emily?" But silence doesn't answer questions like that. The day dragged on like a bad dream. I replayed every conversation with her from the past few months, the times she'd offered to help with the paperwork while I was recovering from surgery, the cheerful texts about simplifying my life, and the way she'd changed the subject whenever I asked to see the property tax forms. It all made sense now. She had planned it. And worse, she thought I wouldn't fight back. That hurt more than the betrayal itself. That she believed I was too old, too weak, too naive to notice. But that night, as the tide crept up the shore and the moon carved a silver path across the waves, something inside me hardened. I wiped my tears, stood by the window, and whispered to my reflection. She has no idea who she just underestimated. That betrayal lit a fire in me I never thought I had. People say a house is just wood and stone, but they're wrong. Some houses breathe. They hold laughter in the walls, grief in the floors, and love in every nail and beam. Mine did. The beach house wasn't something we bought. It was something we built. Tom and I started it when he retired from the Navy. He used to joke that after years of sailing on oceans, he wanted to build one that wouldn't move. So we found a quiet stretch of coast in North Carolina, a place where the waves spoke softly and the gulls cried like they had something important to say. The land was nothing but sand dunes and stubborn grass when we signed the deed. Everyone said it was foolish, but Tom saw beauty where others saw work. He said, "Emma, this place will keep us young." He was half right. It kept our hearts young, but our backs paid the price. We spent that whole first summer painting walls in seafoam green and white. I remember him balancing on a ladder, singing off-key to Sam Cooke while I held the paint tray, laughing till my cheeks hurt. We named the house Sandhaven, our haven by the sand. After Tom passed, the house changed. The laughter quieted, but the echoes stayed. I'd sit on the porch at dusk with his old navy jacket draped around my shoulders, pretending he was just out back fixing something. The sunsets became my church. So when Emily began offering to help manage it, I didn't see danger. I saw kindness. I saw my daughter stepping up where her father once did. "Mom," she'd said one evening, pouring us both a glass of wine, "you shouldn't worry about all this. Let me take care of the property taxes, the maintenance, the paperwork. You should be enjoying your time." I smiled, grateful. "You're sure it's not too much?" "Of course not," she said. "You've done enough for me." I believed her, because I wanted to, because it felt good to be cared for. That first year, things seemed fine. She'd visit on weekends, bringing the kids, helping me with groceries. But small things began to change. I noticed the family photos from the hallway were gone one day. She said she was getting them reframed. The next, she wanted to repaint the living room to make it brighter. At first, I went along. I told myself she was just modernizing things. But there was something clinical about the way she looked at the house. Not like a daughter remembering childhood summers, but like an investor appraising property. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch, I said softly, "It still feels like he's here, you know, when the light hits the water like that. It's like Tom saying hello." She didn't look at the water. She just sighed. "Mom, you have to stop living in the past. It's just a house." Just a house. The words hit harder than she realized. I wanted to tell her that just a house was where she learned to swim, where we celebrated her first birthday, where her father held her when she broke her arm, and where he whispered to me in the last week of his life, "Promise me you'll never sell it." But I stayed quiet, because mothers do that sometimes. We swallow hurt to keep peace. Looking back now, I see all the signs I missed. The hushed phone calls, the realtor brochure I found in her bag that she brushed off as a neighbor's, the way she flinched when I mentioned renewing the insurance under my name. But love makes you blind, especially love for your own child. If I had trusted my instincts instead of my hope, I might have stopped her before she took everything. Yet even then, I didn't know the depth of her betrayal. That Tema would come later, slowly, cruelly, like the tide creeping closer when you're too tired to run. Grief has a way of softening your judgment. It tells you, be grateful for what's left. And when that what's left is your only daughter, you cling tighter than you should. So when the signs began showing, I did what mothers do best. I explained them away. It started small. Emily began talking a lot about the future. "Mom, beach properties are booming right now," she'd say while scrolling through her tablet. "You could make a fortune if you sold at the right time." I'd laugh it off. "Why would I sell? This is home." She'd smile, that polite, patient smile children give their aging parents. "I know, Mom. I just mean it's good to have options." Options. That was her word, her gentle way of saying change. Then, little by little, her visits stopped feeling like family time. They felt like inspections. She'd walk from room to room, taking pictures on her phone. "Just for reference," she'd say. Once I caught her measuring the kitchen counter. She told me she was helping a friend remodel. I wanted to believe her, so I did. One day, a man came to the door wearing a crisp blue shirt and holding a clipboard. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said. "I'm just here to confirm the property details for the listing." "The what?" I asked, tightening my grip on the door frame. "The listing," he repeated, flipping through his papers. "This is 142 Ocean View Lane, correct? The Smith. Residence." My heart skipped. "Yes, but what listing?" He blinked, confused. "Oh, I apologize. Maybe there's been a mix-up. I'll check with the agent." He tipped his hat and left. When I asked Emily about it later that evening, she laughed. "Oh, that must have been the insurance surveyor. You know how these companies get, they always send the wrong people." Her laughter was too loud, too practiced. Still, I smiled, pretending I believed it, because that's what I'd always done. believe her. A few weeks later, I was sitting by the window when she stopped by unexpectedly. "Hey, Mom," she said, setting down a stack of envelopes. "I need you to sign a few documents, just routine stuff for the insurance." She slid them across the table, her nails tapping lightly on the paper. My eyesight wasn't what it used to be, and the print was small. She stood there smiling, watching me sign every page. When I handed the pen back, she leaned down and kissed my forehead. "You're the best," she said softly. I felt a warm swell of pride. That moment, that tenderness, I clung to it. If only I'd known what I was really signing. The next month, I noticed the mail started going to her address instead of mine. The property tax bill didn't arrive. The utility company called to confirm a change of ownership. When I confronted Emily, she sighed like I was being difficult. "Mom, it's just a clerical thing. You worry too much." But her eyes darted away when she said it. And then came the moment that should have told me everything. We were at dinner one night. Her, Mark, and me. She was swirling her wine, talking about her dream of moving to Florida. "A new start," she called it. Mark chuckled. "With that house money, we'll be living oceanfront ourselves." I looked up sharply. "What house money?" Emily's hand shot out to grip his arm. "Mark!" she hissed. Then turning to me with a laugh that sounded like glass breaking, she said, "He's kidding, Mom. You know how he jokes." But the color drained from her face. That's when my stomach turned cold. Something inside me whispered, "You've been tricked." Still, I said nothing, because I was terrified of what the tema might be. That night, I lay awake listening to the waves crash against the shore. Each one sounded like a warning I had refused to hear. I thought of Tom, of his promise to protect me even after he was gone, and somewhere deep down, I knew he was trying to tell me to open my eyes. But when I finally did, it was already too late. The day everything came crashing down didn't start with thunder. It began quietly. The kind of morning that tricks you into thinking life is still gentle. The sun was soft on the curtains, the gulls were calling outside, and I was making pancakes when my phone rang. Emily's name flashed across the screen. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe this was the day she'd apologize for being distant. But instead, her voice was cold, rehearsed. "Mom, just wanted to let you know. We're leaving tomorrow. The beach house has already been sold. The papers are finalized." The spatula slipped from my hand and hit the floor. The sound felt louder than the ocean. "Sold?" I whispered. "What do you mean, sold?" Her tone sharpened, like I was inconveniencing her. "Don't make this harder than it is, Mom. You haven't been using the house anyway. Mark and I took care of everything. It's better this way." My knees buckled against the counter. "Emily, you can't—" She cut me off. "Look, it's done. We'll send your portion of the money once the transfer clears. Don't worry about the details. I'll call you when we're settled. Bye." And just like that, my only daughter hung up. The silence afterward was unbearable. I stared at the phone, waiting for it to ring again, waiting for her to laugh and say it was a misunderstanding. But the seconds turned into minutes, and the tema settled like dust in my chest. She wasn't joking. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there, gripping the counter, my breath shallow. Then, like a wave breaking too close to shore, the memories hit. Tom painting the shutters blue, Emily chasing sand crabs with a bucket. Our first Christmas after his passing, when I'd sat by the fire in that same house and whispered to the ceiling, "Thank you for this home, Tom, for everything." Now it was gone, not by fate, not by storm, but by the one person I trusted most. I drove straight to the house. My hands shook the whole way, the steering wheel slick with sweat. When I turned down Ocean View Lane, my heart sank. There it was, sold, printed in bold red letters across a sign staked deep into the sand. A car was parked in the driveway. Two young strangers stood by the porch, pointing at the windows, chatting excitedly. I watched as one of them unlocked the door. My door. I stumbled out of the car and called out, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" They turned, startled. The woman smiled politely. "Oh, hi, we're the new owners. The realtor said the previous occupant already moved out." Previous occupant. I couldn't find words. My throat burned. My vision blurred. The house looked different already, like it didn't recognize me. The curtains were gone, boxes stacked in the hallway. "Are you all right, ma'am?" the man asked. I nodded weakly. "I'm fine," I lied. I backed away slowly, trying to breathe as the ocean roared behind me. I drove to the pier and sat in my car until the sky went gray. When I finally cried, it wasn't soft. It was guttural. An animal sound pulled from somewhere deep inside. How could she? How could my daughter look me in the eye, help me into bed after my surgery, hold my hand, and then steal the last piece of my life that still felt like mine? People walking by stared, but I didn't care. I was a woman stripped bare, watching everything she'd built crumble in a single phone call. By evening, I forced myself to go home. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the sea wind battering the windows. And then I heard laughter. 2 young men walking past the street outside, joking about that old house finally selling for a fortune. Something inside me snapped. I wiped my face, stood tall, and whispered into the dimness, "No, not yet. This isn't over." The pain was still raw, but beneath it, something fierce began to take root, something that felt like strength. Because if Emily thought she could erase me from my own life, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The morning after that call, I woke up feeling hollow. Not angry yet, just empty, like the tide had gone out and taken every part of me with it. But somewhere between that silence and the second cup of coffee, a voice in my head, my husband's voice, said, "Emma, you're not done yet." So I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Mr. Lawson, our old family lawyer. He had handled Tom's will after he passed. I remembered his deep, patient voice and the way he always called me Mrs. Smith, even after telling him 100 times to just say Emma. When he answered, I almost cried just hearing his calm tone. "Emma, it's been too long. What can I do for you?" I told him everything. Emily's call, the sale, the signatures she'd tricked me into, the insurance papers that weren't. I could hear his breath tighten through the line. "Emma," he said slowly, "do you remember the trust clause Tom insisted on adding when you built the beach house?" I frowned. "The what?" "The ownership clause," he said. "Your husband wanted to make sure the property could never be transferred without your consent while you were alive. The land was purchased under a limited trust, half under your name, half under his estate. Emily couldn't have legally sold the full property." I sat there, stunned. "Are you saying she sold something that wasn't hers?" He paused. "Exactly. She could transfer the land rights, but not the structure. The home itself remains yours. Whoever bought it will soon discover they only own sand, not the house that sits on it." I laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief. The universe had just handed me back a piece of power I thought I'd lost. That afternoon, I went to the county clerk's office to confirm it. The clerk, a kind woman named Teresa, helped me dig through the records. When she found the trust documents, she smiled gently. "Ma'am," she said, tapping the file, "whoever handled that sale is in trouble. This trust is airtight. You can't sell a property you don't fully own." I thanked her, shaking, and stepped outside into the salty wind. For the first time in weeks, the ocean didn't sound like grief. It sounded like justice coming in waves. I drove back to the beach house, parked across the street, and watched the new owners unloading furniture. My house, my memories, being boxed out and replaced. And yet, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I took pictures of everything, every truck, every realtor's sign, every name tag. Then I called Mr. Lawson again. He didn't even let me finish. "I've already filed a cease and desist order. They'll have to halt the sale pending review. And Emily could be charged with fraud for falsifying ownership documents." Fraud. My daughter. The word pierced deep. Not because she deserved pity, but because I remembered when she was small, when she'd hold my hand so tight at the boardwalk because the waves scared her. Somewhere between that little girl and this woman, something precious had broken. Still, I couldn't let her destroy what Tom and I built. That night, I sat on the porch of my small apartment, the one I'd moved into after my surgery. I watched the sea through the thin mist and whispered, "Tom, we're not done yet, are we?" A breeze moved through the palms like an answer. I smiled. "All right then, let's finish this." For the next few days, I gathered every document, every receipt, every email Emily had sent about helping me manage the property. I kept them neatly stacked, labeled, and ready. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was a woman preparing for battle, quietly, patiently, the way only someone who's been underestimated her whole life can fight. Emily thought she'd close the book on me, but what she didn't know was that her signature had written the first chapter of her own undoing. When I finally stood at Emily's front door, the sky was heavy with rain. I hadn't planned to visit her that day. Not exactly. But after Mr. Lawson confirmed the injunction had gone through and the sale was frozen, I knew it was time. Not to scream or accuse, but to look my daughter in the eye and see if there was even a shred of the girl I once knew. Her neighborhood was one of those new suburban developments. Polished lawns, wide driveways, everything too clean to feel lived in. I stood there for a moment, gripping the handle of my old leather purse, before I knocked. Emily opened the door wearing a silk robe, her hair tied up like she had no cares in the world. When she saw me, her expression flickered, surprise, guilt, annoyance, before she composed herself into something cool. "Mom," she said flatly, "you shouldn't be here." "I needed to see you," I said, my voice calm but steady. "We need to talk." She crossed her arms. "If this is about the house—" "It is," I interrupted, "and I'd like to come in." Reluctantly, she stepped aside. The house smelled of citrus and money, that sterile, expensive scent that has no warmth. I followed her into the kitchen, where Mark sat at the counter, scrolling on his phone. He looked up, startled. "Mrs. Smith?" he said awkwardly. "Didn't expect—" "Neither did I," said, setting my bag down. "But life's full of surprises." Emily poured herself a coffee but didn't offer me one. "Mom, I don't want to fight," she said. "You're making this harder than it has to be. The sale was for your benefit. You're not getting any younger, and maintaining that place was too much for you." I looked at her, really looked. The daughter who used to draw me seashells and press them into my hands now stood before me, rationalizing betrayal like it was an act of mercy. "Emily," I said quietly, "you didn't sell a house. You sold our home. You forged my signature. You stole my memories for a check." Her eyes darted away. "You're being dramatic. It was a smart investment. You'll thank me when you see the numbers." "Numbers," I repeated softly. "That's what family is to you now?" She rolled her eyes, exasperated. "You wouldn't understand, Mom. You live in the past. Dad's gone, and you've been holding on to that place like it's going to bring him back." My hands trembled, but my voice stayed calm. "That house was your father. Every beam, every nail, every promise he made to take care of us." Mark stood abruptly. "Look, maybe we should all cool down." I turned to him sharply. "No, Mark, you stay right there. You're part of this too." Then I took a deep breath and said the words that changed everything. "You sold half a house you never owned." Emily froze. "What?" I smiled faintly. "The trust your father created protects that property. The land transfer you faked doesn't cover the home. You sold sand, my dear, but the house still belongs to me." She blinked, confusion flooding her face, then panic. "That's not possible. The realtor—" "Has already been notified," I said. "The sale's frozen. Mr. Lawson filed the order this morning." Her hand shook as she set down her cup. You called a lawyer?" "Of course I did." Mark muttered something under his breath. "A curse, maybe." and stepped away from the counter. Within seconds, Emily's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face drained of color. "It's our realtor," she whispered. She answered, her voice trembling. "Hello? Yes, this is she. What do you mean, the sales invalid? No, we can't be... fraud." She dropped the phone like it burned her. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain hitting the windows. Then I said softly, "I didn't come here to ruin you, Emily. I came here to remind you who you were raised to be." Her eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I just wanted a better life." "You already had one," I said. "You just couldn't see it." I turned toward the door. "You'll hear from Mr. Lawson about the next steps. I hope someday you'll understand why this had to happen." As I stepped outside, thunder rolled across the sky. I pulled my coat tighter and whispered to myself, "You built a house on lies, Emily, and lies always wash away with the tide." The rain fell harder, but for the first time in months I felt light, because justice had come, not with shouting, but with Tema. The morning after the confrontation, I woke before dawn. The sky was still dark, the sea whispering somewhere beyond my window, and for the first time in months, I felt no weight pressing on my chest, just air. Clean, cool, and honest. I brewed my coffee and watched the horizon blush into light. The world had kept turning, even through betrayal, even through heartbreak, and somehow so had I. Later that week, I met with Mr. Lawson one last time. He smiled as he handed me the final court document. "It's all official now, Emma. The property is fully back in your control. Emily's transaction is null and void." I traced my fingers over the paper, the embossed seal catching the light. "So, it's mine again?" He nodded. "Yes. Though, Temafully, I don't think it ever stopped being yours." I laughed softly, the kind of laugh that trembles between relief and disbelief. A few days later, I drove down to Sandhaven. The air smelled like salt and second chances. The sold sign was gone, the driveway empty. The new buyers had already backed out, relieved to recover their losses once they realized the sale was a legal disaster. When I opened the front door, the hinges creaked, welcoming me home. Everything looked smaller somehow. Not because the house had changed, but because I had. I'd seen what it meant to lose everything and fight to reclaim it. Dust motes floated in the morning sun as I walked through the rooms. The kitchen, the porch, the living room, all silent witnesses to my life. I ran my hand along the wall where Tom's height marks for Emily still showed faintly under layers of paint. "Still here," I whispered. I made tea and sat on the porch. The ocean spread out like a promise before me. For the first time, I didn't think about revenge or justice or loss. I thought about peace. Emily called a week later. I almost didn't answer, but something in me needed closure. Her voice was small, stripped of the sharpness it once carried. "Mom?" "Yes." "I got the court papers," she said quietly, "and the letter from Mr. Lawson." Silence hung between us, heavy, uncertain. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. I just let her words drift through the line, carried by static and sincerity. "I thought I was helping," she continued, voice cracking. "Mark, he pushed for it. I went along. I thought if we sold it, we'd finally be secure. But I see now, it was never mine to sell." I closed my eyes, breathing in slow. "Emily, you didn't just sell a house. You sold trust, and that's something you can't buy back with apologies." She sniffled. "I know. I don't expect you to forgive me." I hesitated. "Forgiveness isn't a gift, Emily. It's a release. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I don't want to carry this anger anymore." She cried softly. "Thank you." When the call ended, I sat there for a long while, staring at the ocean. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was stillness. The next day, I invited the grandkids for the weekend. I wanted them to see Sandhaven not as a battlefield, but as a place of roots. We baked cookies, told stories about their grandfather, and built sandcastles just like Emily used to. As the sun dipped low, painting everything in gold, my oldest granddaughter looked up and said, "Grandma, you smile different now." I smiled wider. That's because I finally remembered who I am. Nansing Tui. When I walk along the shore at dusk, I can hear Tom in the wind. Not words, just a feeling. Pride, peace, continuity. Life has a way of breaking us to show us what we're made of. Emily broke my trust. But in the pieces, I found something stronger. My voice, my will, my fire. And as I stand here watching the waves reclaim the shore, I realize something beautiful. The house stood firm through every storm. And so did I.